righty. So we've got the recording started. So I want to welcome everybody here to our call tonight. It looks like we have several people on the call. Each week it seems like we're growing by one or two people at a time. So for something, this is I think our fifth or sixth week now with this call. So, so this is something I've been doing. I was doing these last year, but not on a consistent basis, just kind of very sporadically. This year we've decided to run through the programs and do things consistently each week with topics on some of my study material, what I teach and what I coach on with people, what I work one-on-one with clients, and then also if there's any particular topics or anything that anybody might have that they would like to know about or pick my brain about, this is a great opportunity to do that. You can share your story. You can also ask for, a particular topic or something that maybe somebody's struggling with. And the thing about it is many times that, we feel like we're the only ones feeling the emotions or feeling what it is that we're feeling, and that's not the case. You are not alone. And no matter how much you feel like you're isolated and you're alone, there are so many people just like you, like myself, that have walked in your shoes before you. And I want to build. My goal here is to build this community to the point where it is and that's exactly what it is. It's a community of people that we're like-minded people. I am a firm believer of the law of attraction, that like attracts like, and you hang around people that are like you, and you learn from others who have been there, who have not only the physical scars but the emotional scars. But what I want to talk to you tonight about is, what is your story? Each and every one of us have a story that we tell. Whether or not, when somebody wants to know a little bit about us personally, our life, whatever it is, we tell a story. And there's three questions I always ask somebody. And when somebody might be considering on thinking about working with me, that is a real key issue that I will throw out there. And that is, number one is, where have you been? Where are you now? And where are you going? That, in a nutshell, is your story. And we all know where we've been. We all know where we are right now. But the biggest question is so many of us have no idea where we're going. And that's a big part of, I believe, how I cured my grief, is I found a reason to be going forward, to look in front of me, okay? And what I want to, and the way I like to, let's see, if I click the right button here, we should come up here, right? There we go. Everybody should be seeing a car windshield here, I think it is. So the way I like to say this is, it's just like driving a car. Most of us wind up going through life looking in our rearview mirror. We're looking behind us all the time. We're focused on what's behind us, not necessarily where we are and where we're going. There's a reason why the rearview mirror is so small in your windshield, because it's more important for you to see what's in front of you and where you're going than what it is where you've been and where you are. Okay? With that being said, where you've been is a very important part of your story. That's where our lessons and the things that we've learned and everything that we know that we are, that's where that comes from. And that's where we kind of get stuck. We get stuck in kind of looking at ourselves where we are right now, and we just cannot see what's 5 feet in front of us. And if you don't look and scan in front of your car when you're driving and you're not paying attention with what's in front of you, you're going to have an accident. You're going to hit something. You're going to go off the road. You're going to get off the tracks. And that's the same in our life. When we take the focus off where we're going, we get lost, we get stuck. It's kind of like what I talk about, being lost in the fog. You don't know where you are, you don't know where to turn, you don't know where to go. And a lot of times we look at people, we look for people to help guide us, and the problem is if they haven't been where we are, many times they can't guide us out of that fog. They're just as lost as we are. And I think that's why a lot of times our family, friends, and people we know, and I'm really talking about people that are suffering grief from, we're talking years later down the road, and, might be just a couple years. It might be as many as 10, 20, 30 years later, and it's difficult for, the people that you believe you know and you trust and that you think will always be there may have a difficult time talking to you because they're not in that same fog as you. And so they don't understand why it is that you're still where you are. But, what I want to talk to you about here is, wrong one. Make sure we're in the right place. There we go. And what I want to talk to you about is, so many of us live life with blinders on. I mean, we've heard that saying before, but there's a great big world out there. And it is a scary place, okay? It's scary to get out of our comfort zone. It's scary to get out of, our room and outside the four walls. But, we who have the emotional scars can lead those that need the help, okay? And we can lead the people that, basically we're in most cases, when I'm talking with somebody or working with somebody, I'm maybe only 2 steps ahead of them in the journey and in the walk. It's just that, like when I reach out to mentors and coaches that I look at as people that are further along than I am, they're just a little bit ahead of me. I need their help and assistance sometimes for me to get unstuck, and to be able to go in that direction. So, And I think we have a tendency to not to see that big world out there. I mean, we get stuck in our 4 walls. We get stuck in our little hometown. And I know when my daughter passed away, I talked about I just wanted to put my other daughter and my children in a padded room and lock them up and throw away the key. But, you can't do that. And, you have to let them live their lives regardless of, what it is. And any parent who's lost a child know that we know how fast somebody can go, and then we can turn around and it can happen all over again. And we pray to God that it never does. And but so we have a tendency to kind of seclude ourselves and hide and try to protect people, and a lot of times we're doing ourselves a lot of harm because we're not able to move forward. And so. It all starts with your story, and I'm going to kind of touch on my story a little bit, but that's where it starts. It's how do you tell your story says a lot how you view and see the world. How you see the world will bring that into your life. So, we've all heard if all you see is doom and gloom, guess what? You get doom and gloom. If you're happy and you see happiness and good things, you get more of happiness and good things. Now, with that being said, it's very difficult to do. But but here's the one thing, is you can't smile and frown at the same time. You can't be happy and sad at the same time. Now, you can be happy and then 1 minute later be sad, but you can't do the same at the same time. It's physically impossible. But one of the things is God has blessed us. We're the only creatures on this earth that have this one ability where we can go back into time. And we can visualize something back in our time that really, kind of makes up a little bit of our character, makes up a little bit of who we are. And in most of us, if we could go back into time, close your eyes and go back and think about something that you remember. And I've said this in some of the other calls that, one of the things I really visualize and remember the most is when I was about, I think, 1.5 years, 2 years old, something like that. And my parents were, I was going through potty training, and I had an accident, and my mother put me in a pair of diapers, and so I went outside, crawling on the floor, on the ground outside, making the goo goo gaga noises like I'm a baby. And, she turned around and told me that, she says, well, if you're going to behave like a baby, I'm going to treat you like a baby. Well, even at a very young age, I realized what she was telling me, that, I was behaving like a baby. And so that's exactly what I started doing. I started behaving like a baby. But I remember that situation. Here I am at 55 years old, and I can go back 52, 53 years ago, and I remember that just like it was yesterday. I mean, I can visualize my house. I can see my mother. I can see the sidewalk. I see my sister sitting on the porch. I see, everything that was there. And, But we have that ability to go back into time and kind of look at that, and and then we can also look in today's. We can progress through our life and look into today's world, and we can get a picture of what things would be like today. And then we're the only creatures that can actually visualize something in the future of what we picture or what we like, and we can actually bring that into our life and bring that in. Even if it's like a flower or something, we can actually bring that, and the next thing you know, you have that flower in your garden, or somebody gives you that, a flower. And so, it's really our choice. But the thing about it is it all starts with our story. So, and why story is so important is because I believe that, just like anything else, our story can say a lot about who we are and how we feel about things. It's all how we project our story. And we can do a lot of good with our story, and we can do a lot of harm with our story. So we all have memories of what was, okay? And we all know where we are today in life. But the big question is where do you want to go in the future? When I ask these three questions that I mentioned earlier, it's this third question, I think it really stumps people. And I'm going to give you a little story about a potential, a person that I'm talking to. And I know she's not on the call tonight, but I know she wouldn't mind if I mention it. But, she has a 14-year-old son that's missing, okay? It's been close to 17 years now. And I was having a conversation with some associates late last night on one of our other calls that we do where I work with some other coaches, and we kind of mentor each other. And we were talking about this particular person because I'm stumped, okay, in one respect, because she has a particular story that I cannot relate to. And basically her son has been missing for 17 years. I look at my story. I know exactly where my daughter is. She has no idea where her son is. She holds out hope that he's still alive. But the legal community and the police department and everybody gives her the information that she might as well stop holding out hope. The likelihood he was kidnapped and murdered and he's dead. She comes to me and she wants me, we're going to talk about being in the pit and everything here in a little bit, but, she's been down in this pit area in her life for 17 years, holding out hope that she's going to find her son or he's going to come walking through those doors every day. I can't relate to that story. I mean, I understand her pain a little bit, but I can't sit here and put myself in her shoes. So as a coach, somebody who, as a grief coach, that I'm coaching somebody to begin to live for the future and to see beyond, the past and take them into the direction they want to go and get the result and the transformation that they want, I begin to look at the situation and say, I can't help her. This associate, a good friend of mine that I work with, is she's in Australia, and she turns around and she says, you sure can help her. You have all the experience and all the knowledge you have to help her. And she turns around. She says all she has to do is give you the glimmer of hope that she wants to change, that she wants to move forward. And even though if she can't answer that question and she does not see the future or does not believe that there is a future there, but she desperately wants one, now she says you can help her. Because she says, they have to want it bad enough. When somebody wants a change, they want something bad enough, then they can bring about the change. So it all starts with her story, how she, envisions her story and how she tells her story. I can only imagine, what it might be like at her home, talking with family, friends, people that she knows, and the support groups and everything. I'm sure that we're out there looking for her son. And that, probably have all gone by the wayside, and she's not, and she's there all by herself trying to keep hope alive that she, her son's going to come walking through the door. And, but, she has a very powerful story. As she tells me her story, it really, for me, even though my grief has been, 24 years, for me, and I listen to her, I turn around and look at my own situation, and I have to question. It's like, wow, in some cases, I don't know if I could. I mean, I don't know if I'm as strong as she is, but I think, I don't want to find out. But in order, would I wish that on my worst enemy? But she, you know, she's got a lot of work to do because even you accept something, but how can you accept something that on one hand and then hold hope out on the other hand? I can't hold hope. My daughter's not going to walk back in the door, so that part of my fear is not there. It doesn't, I just know it's not going to happen. So from that standpoint, I'm looking at her story and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, can I really help somebody like that get a transformation they're looking for? Because the question is how, where do they see their future? Where are they going? But as long as they hold out hope and they can see a glimmer of light and they think there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, then there may be a possibility that we can open that door and we can begin and we can go. Now we have a direction. We know where we're going, and now we can put a plan together and work towards that. But that's the one area that I think when I'm talking with some people that most people can't see that. They just don't see it in the future. And for me to really, or for anybody really, to be able to move forward, that's why when people tell me, well, you just got to learn to cope with it. And I turn around and I say, that's a bunch of bull crap. I have to learn to cope, yes, because I got to get to that point where I can cope with a particular situation. Okay, I can cope with my pain or my loss. I can cope with it, and but it doesn't mean I have to live with that feeling for the rest of my life. And so let's get into the meat of the story. Okay, the story starts with what I call the call. It's our direction. It's kind of like the compass. It's really what sets us into motion when we look at our life. It sets us in the direction that we're going to go, okay? And I want you to think for a minute. If you were to go back in time, back when you were younger, at some point in time, and you say to yourself, how many of you wanted to be a fireman or a police officer or a professional athlete, a dancer, a singer, something that was really bigger than life, okay? And you really believe that everything was possible in this world. But if you really stop and think about it, there was people that influenced you in your life. Okay, number one, when I look at my situation, it's when I was 14 years old. My influence in my life was my father. But then my other influence in my life was my high school soccer coach. And he taught me something very valuable that I never put two and two together when it came to grief and loss. But the one thing what he taught me was, he says, if I teach you something in life and you can reuse that and repurpose that, or you can teach that same skill set or that same or bring about that same result and teach somebody how to play the game of soccer and be their coach, then he says, and then that person goes on and teaches somebody. And so you've got this duplication process in place. He says, then, when I'm dead and gone, he says, a part of me will live on. When I had my coach and he was taking me through this process and I was working on my story and he was showing me this part of my story, I then turned around and started peeling the layers back and really going deeper into my story. And the thing about it is that's where I learned about what my soccer coach told me. He told me about that. And then I put the two and two together. And I turned around and I started taking a look, this is where our life lessons are learned. We bring a lot of value to the world. We bring a lot of value to our life. We bring a lot of value to our family. And we have so much knowledge and so much information that we can share with people. And so we can create a story that can be a very powerful story that can bring about change, not only in their life, but also so much in our life because it does so good for others. And in turn, it does so much good for us. So what I'm saying here is I was able to look at this and say, when my daughter has passed away, my daughter has taught me more in death. I've learned more about life through my daughter's death than I would have ever learned if my daughter was still alive. Okay? Now, with that being said, I still believe I would have learned a lot about life but it might have been different. Okay, does that make sense? It would have been different, because my life would have probably took a different direction, and the lessons I would have learned might have been different. Okay, but really, when it boils down to it, I've learned a lot. Okay, and what my high school coach taught me is I can teach others, and so in this case, there's part of my daughter that lives on through me, that lives on through the next person. And if they help somebody and they do something and they share their story and they can make a difference and it makes their life better, then my daughter, his memory lives on. Even if these people have never physically met my daughter or knew anything about them. But the other part of that is also there's another backstory to my daughter, which my daughter drowned. So there's swimming pool safety, there's water safety, there's all these other things that I talked about. And so, and one of the things I've learned to do is have this communication with my daughter, and she always told me, she says, Dad, nobody will ever listen to you about that stuff because they don't believe that it's going to happen to them. It always happens to somebody else. So, so they're, the only people that are going to be listening to you are the ones that their children have already drowned or their children have already, have passed on. So they're the only ones. So that's where you need to focus your efforts. And so, my call really starts, that kind of sets my direction. Even though back when I was 14 years old, I never had any idea at 55 years old I'm going to be talking about grief. But that's kind of, set me off in the direction and gave me the skill set or the mindset that all of a sudden, hey, I can bring value to this world. I can learn life lessons. And my dad, upon graduation in high school, my dad told me that this is when life was going to start. And and my real education was going to start because, all the school stuff is over. It's time to go live life, and life is going to be hard, and it's going to teach you a lot of lessons. And you're going to have to learn. Of course, I was 18 years old, and I thought my dad was just full of crap, and he didn't know what he's talking about. I knew everything at 18 years old. So, any one of us who's been 18 would probably relate to that part of the story. But, then your story has what's called a pit moment, okay? After you kind of set up the call, that kind of sets up the character or sets up who you are. Then we have this pit moment in our life. This is the moment that we know that we are at the bottom of the hole or the bottom of the pit, and that there's just is not any light at the tunnel. If you can see the picture here, unless you're on the phone, should be a picture that looks like you're looking up like a chimney or a hole or a pipe or something, and there's light at the end. And sometimes this is the way our life might feel because we are down in that mucky hole and we feel stuck. And sometimes, and my mom has always told me, she says, with all the troubles I've had in my life, she always says sometimes, you got to get down in that pit so deep before you can get out. And, I don't know what she means by that, but I guess, when you're down in it, you're down in it. And sometimes we sink a little lower before we can actually lift ourselves up, and we start to pull ourselves out of this pit. My pit moment was actually the day that, June 15th, 1993, the day my daughter passed away. Now, we can have multiple pits. We can have multiple pits in our story. It's not just one particular event. There can be multiple events in our life that have really shaped us and our attitudes about how we view our life, and that makes up part of our story. But, but this is the one part of the area that I look at my life, and that was a very traumatic experience that really kind of set the wheels in motion for the next 20-plus years. And then, 8 years later, to have my wife come home and tell me she doesn't love me anymore. And then, that turn around and basically a death of a marriage. I grieved my daughter's loss all over. Not only did I feel as a failure as a husband, because my marriage was failing. I'd already felt as a failure as a father because I wasn't there to protect my daughter. Then I owned my own business, and my business was failing. I hated my business. I hated everything I did. I turned to suicide, not once, twice. I looked down a barrel of gun when I was in my office at 2 o'clock in the morning wanting to commit suicide, only to realize that there was no bullets in the gun, and that really turned out to be a blessing because if there was, I wouldn't be here today. And then I turned around and started to reach out for help. And and so I think if I was talking with somebody here just a little while ago, and that we understand that sometimes we may get at the end of our rope at some point in time, and we'd feel like it's all over, but but it's not. I mean, that's there's a saying, when the tough get going, or anyways, if I don't know the saying, I shouldn't say it, right? But But anyways, I think you know what I'm talking about. Um, you know, and that's when we're really down in that pit, and we just don't see the opportunities that really are lying in front of us. Again, you know, we're focusing on the rearview mirror. We're not looking out the windshield and seeing the bigger picture of what's really there in front of us. And you know, so you know, and then you know, then obviously you can have multiple pits. There may be more, you know, other pits that aren't quite as traumatic as, you know, say a loss or a death and everything else. But here's the one thing is then, you know, you in order to get out of that pit, you've got to go through a search. And that can be a lot of soul searching. You're going to go through this process where you're going to start searching for something. You're going to start asking a lot of questions. Of course, we as parents, if we've lost, or anybody who's lost anybody, especially if it's been of accident or something like that, of not natural causes, you know, we ask why me, why this, and we go through the bargaining. We go through all the stages of grief, and we go through the bargaining. And I remember just looking there at my daughter at the funeral, saying and still asking God, take me, bring her back. I'm bargaining with God to, you know, I would give my life today, you know, 24 years later, I'd give my life today if my daughter can come back. You know, but you know, but we go through this bargaining stage and we start asking all these questions. But we start looking at things and we start searching for stuff. And in many cases, we're looking so hard we don't see what's really in front of us. And we start searching for something, and what we're really searching for, you know, because we don't know what we're looking for, a lot of times things will get passed over. You know, then you start asking, you know, where do you go? Okay? And a lot of times we're asking somebody that really has not walked in our shoes, and, you know, so a lot of times they might make a comment to you or something that you're like, wow, that doesn't make a lot of sense, or they just flat out say, I don't know. You know, so, you know, we start searching, and in a lot of cases we're searching and talking with people that really you know, they don't understand us. They can't help us. And in this case, you know, my ex-wife, she didn't understand me. You know, she didn't understand what I was going through, nor did I understand with her, and so there wasn't the communication, and 8 years later, you know, we grew apart and we went separate ways. And to this day, 24 years later, we still both cannot really talk about our daughter. There's issues about that. We can't talk about it. I feel I can, but she can, or vice versa. You know, I think you probably understand what I'm saying there. And but you know, we're kind of going through life, and we're looking for people, and we're talking to people, and it's like nobody's listening, and you still just feel so alone, and that you just don't understand, you know, why it is that you're looking for. But you know, in my case, I thought, because I was always in business, I thought what I was really looking for was success. If I can go get success, make a pile of money, create a big business, I could solve all my problems. Well, that was a lie that I told myself. Over 20 years, I kept searching. It led me down the road of bankruptcy, not once, but twice. I lost my home, and I turned around and lost relationship with my children in some cases. Only that I've got them back, but I've lost relationships with, you know, all my friends at that time in my life are gone. I mean, I don't mean gone. They're still around. We have nothing in common. We don't even, I mean, if we see each other, we'll talk. But other than that, we don't talk. I mean, there's nothing there to talk about. They don't understand me, and I really don't care if they do or not. You know, I just pray and hope that they never have to live through what I've lived through. And then, you know, so I started searching for all this stuff, only to turn around on the verge of a multi-million-dollar business. I turned around and walked away from that and started searching again, then, went to a job, didn't like that, and kind of, you know, just blowing one process up to another. And, you know, but while we're searching for something, we can have a breakthrough, okay? We start to have breakthroughs and things, but, you know, our story, you know, the slide here says, you know, our story can be this is where the story gets very hard, okay? And, you know, as the pencil kind of shows there, you know, it's kind of things are falling apart, but we're trying to hold everything together because, you know, what are we really searching for? We don't really understand what it is that we're searching for. And in my case, it was, you know, I was searching for, you know, success and this and this and this because, you know, I thought all that was going to make me happy. Because, you know, realistically, that was what I wanted before my daughter passed away. I was building a business, and I was doing something, and I was doing it for myself and my family. And, you know, and so what I realize now, as I begin to, learn my life lessons and begin to study a lot about my story, and not only, I've written my story probably dozens of times, and every time I write it, the story's the same, but the message is a little different, and how I deliver it is a little different each time, because it changes. I learn a little bit more about it, and I begin to change that story. And, so our search will lead us to breakthroughs, okay? And, and it'll lead us through breakthroughs with the help of others, and sometimes people you would never really expect it. There was a point in time in part of my story where I tell, I was driving semi-truck, and I got a phone call that my father had less than a year to live. He had cancer. And, as I told you in the beginning of my story, one of the people that really I felt kind of shaped me of who I wanted to be was my father. But the biggest thing about that, I always wanted my father to be proud of me. I never felt that my father was proud, because I failed at business, I failed as a father, and I failed as a husband. And so one of the things was I knew I had to speak to my father before he passed away. And I had to get something off my chest. And so, and when I told my father how I felt, he told me, and he says I was totally wrong. He says, he was always proud of me. Most men, we don't talk a whole lot. Sometimes we don't tell people how we feel or what. And my father was one of those type of guys. He never was very open with me, and never really told me that he was proud of me. So I go through life searching and trying to, make sure he was proud of me. Obviously, you can't obtain something that you already have. So again, that's one of those lies that we tell ourselves that we begin to believe that is true, because I've told myself that my father wasn't proud, but all along he was. Well, then, he turns around and told me, he says, remember when I told you in high school, when you graduated high school, that life was going to teach you a lot, that this is when your true education and your true schooling was going to start. He says, you have some special gifts. Life has taught you a lot. He says, I don't know what your purpose is, but he says it's there. And he says, in due time, it will be given to you, and it'll be open to you, and you'll know exactly what to do. It's funny, and he's passed away now, but it was funny, years later, he was so right. It's almost like he was able to forecast the future, decades ago, and he was a very wise man. And the thing about it is, I never really gave him the credit. But again, that begins my breakthrough. I'm starting to have breakthrough, and from people, from with the help of others. And so it's kind of like this. The slide shows, you're climbing a mountain. Sometimes you need to help up to get up the hill. Gravity is a force that works against you, just like grief is an emotion and a force that will work against you. And sometimes we need the help of others sometimes to lift us up. And it's not always, the people that are hurting right along with us, sometimes they're not the best candidate to always help us. Even though I wanted my ex-wife to help me, she couldn't. She was grieving. Nor could I really help her, through that process, because, we both were grieving differently, okay? And that makes it very difficult to talk to us, because we talk to, when I talk with my spouse and I would talk to her, she would get upset and emotional, but it might be something that didn't upset me, but it upset her, or vice versa. She would talk to me, and she could say something that might upset me. And so a lot of times we choose not to talk. And so the help that we can get can come from all kinds of different areas. One of the, I'll share one thing with you here before I kind of get ready to close this out, but I remember going through a grief group with other parents, and this lady shared with me a comment, and I really thought, I always kind of, and it's a very profound thing that she said. And she had a 16-year-old daughter that committed suicide, and as she states, her daughter didn't do a very good job at it, because it put her in a coma, and basically she became a vegetable, as she told me, and 6 months later, they had to make a decision to turn the machine off. Well, to me, and as she says, my daughter died multiple deaths, not only the death of the day that she tried to commit suicide, but she also died a death when we turned the machine off, and we had to be there through this whole process. And, again, that's another story. When you start to hear their story, it's like you can't imagine the pain of making that decision. But she said to me, she says, the way she understands, she says, look at it this way. If God, and I don't know what anybody's faith is here, and I'm not a preacher, and I don't, it's not like I'm trying to lead somebody to God, so obviously don't take it that way. But here's the thing. She says, if God was to come to you, and she's speaking to me as about my daughter. And my daughter passed away 2 weeks before her 4th birthday when she was 3 years old. He says, if God was to come to you and give you a daughter, and then 2 weeks before her 4th birthday, he would call your daughter home, would you still take her? If he's going to give her to you, and you're only going to have her for almost 4 years, would you still want her? I turned around and I said, what kind of cotton-picking question is that? First of all, I didn't know how to answer it. That was the funny thing. It's like I hesitated. And thought, oh, my God. And it really opened my eyes. It's like we are really a selfish people, that I would rather keep my daughter here than let her go with God, okay, if that's the way you're looking at it. But the answer to that question is hell yes, I would take my daughter. Even if I knew I was going to have her for just 3 years or 4 years or whatever the time frame is, you would do it. And you know what? And that's a gift that we're given, that at the time that we, of our children, we choose not to live our life at the fullest, to the fullest that we can possibly live, and be able to live like today and each and every day is the last day that we're going to be here, or that's the last day that they're going to be here. And that's where the breakthrough starts to happen. And that's how I can get up each and every day, because I can be on a call like this, be talking to people. Some people are going to see and understand what I'm talking about, and there are people that don't agree with what I'm talking about. But you know what? If they get one little bit of nugget and that helps them out, then that allows me to get up tomorrow and go do this again, because each and every day I have a breakthrough myself. I had a breakthrough last night talking with some of my associates, and the one gal out of Australia showed me and talked me into how I could understand how I can help out this one lady where her son's been missing for 17 years. So I had a breakthrough last night on a call where I'm working with, where I'm working with them and they're working with me. And so, so that now fuels me to where I want to go, do this again. And that's what I'm talking about. Our grief will work against us, and it will keep us down. It's a very powerful emotion, and it will tear us apart. It'll tear us apart from the inside out, and it will take things away from us. It'll take our prized possessions away from us. It'll take family away from us. It will take our homes away from us. It'll take our jobs and businesses and other friends, and just and the thing about it is we let it happen. And we have a choice. We don't have to let that happen, okay? But it's a long process. It doesn't happen overnight. I wish I could say it did, but it doesn't. But the point of it is you got to be able to see that light there. You got to know and understand that you can come out of the fog. You can come out of the pit. You can come out of life, and you can begin to live life with clarity. Things become much clearer to you. You understand things better. You accept things a little bit, more freely, because you are able to forgive yourself. I was able to forgive myself. I'm not the failure that I was as a father. I did the best that I was able to do. I'm not the failure as a husband. You know what? If my ex-wife doesn't share with me and let me know what's broke, I cannot fix what I do not know. So I feel like we have to share an equal portion of the blame if it was a divorce, for an example. But, I know that if I was in that pool with my daughter, she would not have died that day, but I wasn't. Just the same as if we can't control we can't control every particular circumstances, and we can't hold ourselves accountable for those situations. And we can begin to live life with clarity. It all starts how we talk to ourselves. That's why our story process is so important. I teach several parts of the story. First off, I want to write, when I say write a story, write the story, get a blank piece of paper, and begin to write the story as you see it today. And then read it aloud. And I think you would be amazed of how it may sound. And it's going to probably sound like a pretty negative, not a very happy story. Obviously, it's not. But there's a different, you can say this a little bit differently, how you see things, starting with your call and, kind of setting it up and, but part of that is finding the person that you once were and what you really wanted out of life and what you really wanted to have, because we all had goals, we all had dreams. What happened is something happened in our lives that took that away. That's why I say grief can be a very powerful emotion. It can destroy us. It can take things away from us. There's one quote that I live by, and it's a quote by Norman Cousins. Norman Cousins says, "Death is not the greatest tragedy in life. The greatest tragedy in life is what dies in us while we live." And we have so much to give. So how we tell our story, understanding the lies that we have told ourselves over the years, and we do that with good intentions. Don't get me wrong. We do that because we tell ourselves things so we can manage it. It's almost like it's a mechanism within our brains that is there to protect us. Because if we really, at that particular point in time when we are so vulnerable, if we really looked at things the way they truly are, we probably would, go off the deep end, more so to speak, okay? Or we would be impossible to live with, or we would bite our children's heads off, or or whatever the case is. We would, maybe quit our job when we shouldn't, or whatever, because the grief will make us make decisions that sometimes are not the most rational decisions and in our best interest. And so from that standpoint, we don't have the clarity. So, it's how we tell our story. It's how we talk to ourselves. And we have to understand that, as we go through the story process, we'll begin to learn some things about ourselves a little bit. And then we can begin to answer that third question. Where do you want to go? Where do you see yourself in the future? What do you want to accomplish? Because part of that is knowing the type of person you were before, kind of like before grief, and then understanding that, your life has changed and it's forever changed. And, and I think that's what hurts, is because we want to go back to the way it was before. We have to accept that we can't go back there. Not only can I not go back to the day before my daughter died, I don't want to go back. Okay? And I know that's hard to say, but I don't want to go back. All right? Knowing what I know now, I don't want to go back. If it didn't happen, then I would never be in a situation to say what I'm saying. So from that standpoint, what I'm saying, it doesn't matter. It's just the point that I would not turn the clock back, okay? Because, I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. I am exactly where God intends me to be. I'm exactly where my daughter wants me to be. And I'm doing exactly what I know would make my daughter happy. And in turn, I know that makes my Lord happy, and it makes my family happy. It makes everybody around my life happy. So, we are able to, go on with our life and go on with everything. So, so with that being said, we're going to kind of wrap things up here. I always try to keep these about 45 minutes. There's always another part of the story process, and that story process is something that is let's say, it's the rewriting of the story, and we come back to it kind of from a positive standpoint. And I think I'm going to kind of focus on that on our next call next week, and we'll kind of go into that with the second part of, hey, if I work on and developing a story, then, if I want to change my story so I can kind of tell it in a little more positive way, so I can get myself moving in that direction, we'll kind of focus a little bit, because I feel like this was a major key that I found, and that really led towards me finding the cure for my grief. And the thing about it is I learned it from my coach and my mentor, who is not a grief person at all. He's a business person. He was working with me from the standpoint of business. And in turn, I started to learn this. And I realized that I knew everything. I knew exactly what I needed to know years ago. Just like my dad said, he says, you've got gifts. You may not know what they are yet, but it will be given to you in time. Just like each and every one of us have gifts. We have life lessons. We have a purpose, and we have a mission. We may not be ready to accept that yet, so that's why it's not presented to you yet, but at some point in time it will be. And so you just need to keep focused on the future and to keep taking the steps you need to be taking to keep moving you in that direction. Does that make sense? Because I know it's a hard journey, it's a hard walk. If it was easy, then, as the saying says, everybody would be doing it, right? But this is one club that nobody wants to be part of, that nobody wants to do. It's only those lucky ones like us that get to do this. But you know what? When we come out on the other side and we come out of the pit and we're standing there looking out at the world and seeing what a beautiful world this really is and what our gifts are, and that we can stand there and count our blessings and be thankful for everything the gifts that we have, then we've truly arrived, and we're able to, and we will know where we're going. Okay? There will be a recording of this, so we will have this recording up. If we've got any questions, I'm going to go ahead here, and if you're on a phone, I'm going to go ahead and unmute anybody if they have a question here. But if you're on the phone, you can always hit star. I think it's star 6. If you're muted, you can come out on the call. And if we're not, if nobody wants to, if anybody has anything they would like to say or comments, we can. This is a great time. If it's something that you don't wish to ask questions, that's fine. You can always email me with particular questions, comments, or anything like that. So hopefully, I was able to bring a little bit of value here and maybe touched on something that you can use, or you can use all or bits or parts. And like I said, each and every one of us have a very unique story that we can tell, but we can, it has to start someplace. So, all righty. Well, we'll just make sure I don't see. Wait a second. Yeah, I do have a. Oh, it was just a comment by Chad. Well, thanks, Chad. He sent me a comment here. Appreciate that. And, yeah, I look forward to the conversation here next week with you. So we'll be talking with you then. But I appreciate you being on the call tonight here. So, well, with that being said, we're going to go ahead and end the recording. And look for the recording. We'll post this up for those that you would like to re-listen to this, or those of you that are listening to this for the first time. So if you are listening to this first time on the recording, if you got a question, feel free to email me at rick@afathersloss.com, and we'll make sure we get back to you as quickly as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this recording.